So Jai Bhim and Namo Buddhaya to all of you. And today we will be studying lesson number 5 in our course on Buddhist philosophy. We have covered 4 lessons so far, and today we are going to cover a very important pivotal lesson in our series of 10 lectures. So let me share the presentation. Okay. So today we are going to study what is known as Emptiness and Nāgārjuna. And the subtitle is The Middle Way Beyond Essence. And I hope that this is going to be a very interesting session because there is a lot of discussion and sometimes confusion over the term emptiness in Pali Sunna, and in other Indian languages, we call it shunya. So it's about śūnyatā and Nāgārjuna. So let's go deep into that. So in the 4th lecture, we have studied the dependent origination, and we have looked into it very deeply as to what is dependent origination all about. And the question that ultimately leads to the today's topic is, if everything arises through conditions, what is the thing in itself? So we have seen that everything originates depending on the causes and conditions. That is what we studied in the last lesson. So the question naturally arises, and this 5th lesson connects with the 4th in terms of the question that arises. If everything arises through conditions, everything, nothing in the world can arise of its own. Everything arises through conditions. So what is the thing in itself? So what is the essence of everything that arises? So as we have seen, lesson number 4 established that nothing arises independently. Everything arises dependently. So lesson 5 asks whether anything exists independently. So this question that you have to bear in mind, whether anything exists independently. So this is the underlying sentence that we have to bear in mind. And let me show you the image. This is like, the everything is interconnected in the sense of what is called the dependent origination. So there are beautiful sort of metaphors, like in the room. If you are in the room and the room has mirrors all over the places, so every mirror reflects every other mirror. So like that, that's how the conception of reality is conceived in what is known as the Avatamsaka Sutra. In China, it is known as the Hawaiian Sutra. So this is just a graphic representation of the fabric of reality. So coming to this, the sentence beneath the whole lesson, we have to bear in mind the things are real. The Buddha never said that the things are unreal, but they are not independently real. So, if we look at, for example, cup, we are going to use the example of the cup a lot. So, whenever we look at the cup, we think that it's an independent entity. But when we explore, when we inquire, we begin to know that it cannot exist of its own. It arises depending on the causes and conditions. That doesn't mean that the cup is not real. Cup is real because it gets something done. And when we go to other lessons, we are going to look at Dhammakirti's way of asserting whether something is real. On what basis we can reckon that something is real, based on its function. So things are real, but they are not independently real. We cannot find the independent real existence of anything. 1 minute. If people join the class, before, then there is so much problem. Okay. So can you see the slides?
Yes, we can see.
Okay.
Yes, doctor.
So the things are real, but they are not independently real. This keeps us away from both extremes, absolute existence and absolute non-existence. And we are going to see that what the Buddha taught the middle path. It is not, absolute existence or absolute non-existence. So, that's the middle path. And we are going to look into that very deeply in the course of our lesson today. So bear in mind these things are real, but they are not independently real. Oh my goodness. I have a request. Please join the class on time because I cannot admit, when I'm giving presentation. This is my request. What is happening?
Make someone co-admin so
No, I
that your
cannot make
time will be
because
saved.
I'm recording as well.
Concentration.
No, I'm recording as well. I
Okay.
cannot do that.
Okay. Okay. No problem.
Please join on
Your
time.
time.
Please join on time because this is not good. Next time I'm going to close the session, and close the classroom because this is so much of annoyance, no? What is happening? Okay, so okay. So, this is what we are going to study. Things are real, but they are not independently real. So we see the solid world around us as we have seen in the previous session as well in lesson number 4 that we feel that the things are independent. But when we inquire, we realize that the things are not, independent. They appear to us as independent objects, separate objects. But when we dig deep into that, which we are going to do in the upcoming lesson as to how how we perceive the world, that's what we are going to look at. So we perceive the solid world because of our senses, and that's because of our sensory limitations. We perceive the world the way we perceive it, but the world necessarily is not like the way we perceive it. And we can now clearly see that our perceptions are based on our senses. So the solid world, we normally meet the world as if it were made of self-contained things. So where exactly is the cup? So let's launch an inquiry. Where exactly is the cup? Because this is the example that we are going to use. So let's look at each question very carefully. So is the cup its material? So can we distinguish cup from its material? Is it its shape? Is it its function? Is it the name cup? Is it something apart from all this? So our aim is not to deny that the cup doesn't exist. Our aim is to examine how it exists. I think this is how the Buddhist inquiry goes into that we don't accept anything on its face value. We inquire. And that's what, something we share in common with science because science also inquires. So you see, like whenever we hold a cup in our hand, we can ask this question carefully. We inquire: is the cup its material? Or if, for example, the cup can be made up of steel, the cup can be made up of clay, the cup can be made up of glass. You see, so how is the cup its material? So can we say that the glass is cup or clay is cup or uh, or wood is cup? So is it its shape? So cup, as we know, comes in many shapes. Is it its function? The cup has very important function. Sometimes it can have a decorative function. Sometimes it can have a function to drink soup or whatever. And is it the name cup? But we know that, in different languages, the cup is called differently. Is it something apart from all this? So can we point out something apart from, what is called cup? So you see, when we launch our inquiry into something, then we begin to unravel a completely different reality of the particular object that we are inquiring into. So, this question or this inquiry is applicable to all the objects around us. So the cup opens into relations. So for example, cup, not a hidden substance, but a relational identity. So the cup is, we can know the cup only through material, form, labor, language, and use. So these are some of the, network of relations around cup. For example, shape, use, language, material, fire, labor, need and market. So you see, the cup is not something which has its independent sort of existence. It's a relational existence. And we're going to look into that. Okay. So when we look into cup, then we can see that we cannot find it, nor we can deny it. So analysis does not show there is no cup. It shows that there is no cup existing by itself. So you see, that is the difference. We are not saying that there is no cup. What we are saying that the cup is not existing by itself. So we know if we look at the process of making of a cup. So, there is a clay, and then, some potter, crafts the cup. Then, it's fired in the, furnace, and then we get what is called the cup. So, this is what happens in terms of the cup. So as we are seeing it, it's neither found nor denied. Analysis does not show there is no cup. It shows that there is no cup existing by itself. This difference is the beginning of shunyata. So you see what the Buddha is teaching underlying is this, that there is no ultimate substance. Everything is relational. Everything is processual. It's not that, there is something, the cup exists permanently, that there is a substance called cup. So cup is always in the flux. It's changing all the time, as we know that the science has discovered that, everything, nothing in the world is stationary. Everything is moving. Everything is changing all the time. Okay. So let's inquire further. So you see, from arising to being, we see that dependent origination first explains how things arise. We have seen in the last lecture as to how the plant arises, or any other thing arises in the world, depending on causes and condition. We have seen the example of a plant that depending on the seed, the sprout comes into being, because depending on sprout, we have a plant, then we have leaves, we have flowers, seeds, and again, the cycle continues. And these are the causes, and the conditions are like that if there has to be soil as a condition, earth, and sunlight, water, rains, these are the conditions. You see, nothing exists of its own. Everything is, explains, the dependent origination explains how things arise. Then Nagarjuna asks what kind of existence such things can have. So whatever arises, what is the nature of such things? Okay, so let's look into that. Very interesting. So the wave turns inward. Now we are going to look into the things from the inside, because in the lesson number 4, the question was what conditions produce this? What causes and conditions produce certain things? The lesson 5 asks, can the produced thing exist independently? So whatever is produced, can it exist independently? So that is the question that we are going to dwell into today. So let's look at, like a mathematical derivation. So we know that the things arise depending on the causes and condition. So because the things arise depend on the causes and condition, they cannot exist from its own side. Okay, so they cannot exist from its own side means not from its own side means lacks svabhāva. And that is called the svabhāva śūnyatā, emptiness of svabhāva, lack of any inherent, reality. Lack svabhāva leads to is empty, and empty means appears, functions, and functions conventionally. Now, this is a very important word, appears and functions conventionally. So in the ultimate reality, if we look at the ultimate reality of the cup, we cannot establish that there is a cup, but in the conventional reality, that is our day-to-day reality, we can see that conventionally the cup exists. So let's not be confused at this moment. I'm going to clarify you all this as we go on in our lesson, but let's look at this once more. That depends on condition, things arise, and because depends on condition, things arise, they cannot exist from its own side. Because they cannot exist on its own side, they lack the inherent svabhāva. Because they lack inherent svabhāva, they are empty. And because they are empty, conventionally appears and functions conventionally. Okay, this is true about everything in the world. So dependent origination and emptiness are not two doctrines. They are two ways of seeing the same reality. That's what Nāgārjuna said. That's what the Buddha said.
स्वभाव के बारे में थोड़ा और बताइए. स्वभाव.
Okay. Svabhāva means anything we think that there is inherently existence. The svabhāva of cup. Is there anything in cup? That's its svabhāva. Right? So it's not svabhāva in a psychological sense at this moment. That's what we use in the common Indian languages. Iska svabhāv, uska svabhāv. It's not in that so. Is there anything inherent to that? Okay. For example, if we look at cup, the reality of the cup can change anytime. So there is nothing, no substantial existence of cup. Okay. Svabhāva. Like we know the other word abhāva. Right? Bhava, abhava. Exist, non-exist. Okay. And svabhāva.
Abhava means scarcity, lack of something.
Lack of something. There is no svabhāva. Okay. Now it will clarify. We as we move on, it will be clarified. Don't worry. So, okay. So this is what Nāgārjuna says in Mūla Madhyama Karika. This topic looks very complicated to begin with, but it is not. If we look at it very carefully, if we inquire carefully, we can understand this topic very well. So Nāgārjuna says in Mūla Madhyama Karika, in verse 24.18, whatever is dependently arisen, that is explained to be emptiness. That being a dependent designation is itself the middle way. Okay. So you see, we see dependent arising. We have seen it in the last previous class, dependent arising. Then today we are studying emptiness. That there is svabhāva śūnyatā, and then we see we give it a designation, some designation. This is a cup, this is a tiger, this is that. So we give we have this dependent designation, and depending on that we have the middle way. So just hold this in your mind for some time, because the more we go on, the latter things will clarify. So Nāgārjuna draws out the consequence. Nāgārjuna is not inventing a new metaphysics. He's not saying that there is something, some underlying substance which is the primordial reality of the world. For example, in Brahmanism, they talk about Brahma, that there is an ultimate reality, ultimate substance called Brahma. So Nāgārjuna is not inventing any new metaphysics. He is not accepting any metaphysics. What he is saying is, he takes the Buddha's teachings of dependent origination and asks it to become fully consistent. Okay, so this is a philosopher who is inquiring into the reality of the world. Okay, so like that, we have to be inquiring into the reality of the world. So no dependent arising, no independent arising, no independent being. Because the things cannot arise of their own. They arise depending on the causes and conditions. So there is no independent being. There is no independent entity. Everything is interdependent. So let's look into that. So what is svabhāva? That was your question, Mahendra sir. So svabhāva means intrinsic nature, self-established nature, or condition independent essence. So this will make you clear that what is svabhāva. Svabhāva means intrinsic nature. Okay, self-established nature or condition independent essence. So when we inquire into something, can we find its intrinsic nature? Can we find its self-established nature or condition independent essence? So for example, look at this object called a diamond. We know that the diamond is forged inside the earth, depending on the heat, depending on the pressure, depending on the temperature, depending on the particular elements, carbon in this case. Okay, so if we look into that carefully, can we find the intrinsic diamond, that something inherently exists as diamond? And when we inquire into that, we find that it doesn't. Does it have self-established nature? No. Or condition independent essence? Okay, so this is what is the svabhāva. So the test of essence. So how do we know that there is a svabhāva? So you see, if there is something with svabhāva, would have to be independent of causes. And we know that there is nothing in the world which is independent of causes, independent of parts. It cannot be, it cannot be like cut ab initio, till it's like, for example, if you cut something, if you cut gold, gold brick into, at its atomic level or molecular level, we cannot find that there is a intrinsic substance. We only find that, the electrons are revolving all the time around what is called a nucleus. And there are, protons which are also moving all the time. The neutrons are moving all the time. So, we cannot find, we cannot have anything without parts. Okay. Independent of relations. So if something with a svabhāva would have independent of relation, it will exist of its own. But we know that nothing exists of its own. Independent of conceptual designation. Okay, so even we don't conceptually designate it, it should exist. Incapable of genuine transformation. So if something has a svabhāva, it will never transform into any other thing. Right? It will remain as it is. And we know that in the world, there is nothing in the world which remains as it is. So this is the test of essence or test of svabhāva. Now, a fixed essence cannot truly change. If a thing exists through its own fixed essence, what could make it become otherwise? Change, learning, healing, decay, birth, and liberation all require dependence. The critique of essence is therefore not a denial of life. It is the condition for understanding life. So we are not denying that, things don't exist. We say that they don't independently exist. They come into being depending on the causes and conditions. So they have no svabhāva, they have no intrinsic, nature. They are not self-existing. They are not, having conditioned independent essence. Okay. So if the thing exists through its own fixed essence, what could make it become otherwise? And we know that the things transform, all the time. And if the time permits, I'm going to show you some videos. So 10 minutes videos, let's see. So change, learning, healing, decay, birth, and liberation all require dependence. So we come into being because of the dependence. We cannot arise independently of other things. So for example, every time we are breathing, that's an essential condition for our survival. We intake food. We, are dependent on shelter, food, other people, isn't it, all the time? And we can see that dependence of our own life on so many other things. So the critique of essence is therefore not a denial of life. We are not denying life. We are not denying things. It is the condition for understanding life. We are trying to cultivate the sammaditthi. We are trying to see the world as it is. So conventional identity, not independent essence. So conventional identity is usable, named, shared, responsible, open to change. Okay, that is the conventional identity. If there is an independent essence, it will be self-grounded, unchanging, unconditioned, outside relations, not found in experience. We cannot experience something which never changes. We experience things because they change. That's a very important point. If the things are not changing, we will not experience them. Okay. This is a very deep point that we are going to look into in the upcoming lectures as to how we perceive the things as separate things and, independent things. But in reality, they are not that. So the middle way preserves the first and rejects the second. So, the Buddha said that, conventionally, things exist on the level of language, on the level of function, on the level of responsibility, they do exist. Okay. But if we inquire deep into them, we find that they do not exist as we perceive. So Buddha is not asking us to deny our perceptions. He's not asking us to deny the world. He's asking us to inquire deep into the reality of the world and understand that there is no essence, there is no condition independent existence. So this is what we have to bear in mind. Okay, so let's go further. So let's examine like Nagarjuna did. So take an obvious concept and ask whether it survives ultimate analysis. So take any objects in the world, any obvious concept you take, and ask whether it survives ultimate analysis. Okay, so let's do it. For example, the flame. We are going to study the 4 examples. So let's look at the example of a flame. We have all seen the flame. So the question is the flame identical with the fuel? Is it different from the fuel? Does it possess the fuel? Does it exist somewhere inside the fuel? So these are the 4 questions of Nagarjuna. It starts with the Buddha, Chatushkoti. This is called the tetralemma. Okay. So looking at the example of the flame, we can inquire into that. Is the flame identical with the fuel? Is it different from the fuel? Does it possess the fuel? Does it exist somewhere inside the fuel? The flame functions, but not as a self-existing thing. So we are not denying that there is no flame. There is flame, but not as a self-existing thing. Right? The flame arises depending on the causes and condition. No fuel, no flame. Right? So these are the 4 questions that should be guiding us. Let's look at other things. This is Nagarjuna's very favorite example. Where is motion? Okay. In what has already moved. So whatever is gone, can we say that there was a motion there? Or in what has not yet moved? That is future. So past and future. But it's happening in the present. We cannot establish the motion in the present also. So this is Nagarjuna's first karika, where he says that motion is, ultimately there is no motion. Conventionally, there is a motion, but ultimately there is no motion. And this is the question, these are the questions that Nagarjuna asked. In what has already moved? In what has not yet moved? In the object presently moving, can the mover and movement be established separately? So movement is real as process, not as an independent essence. So we cannot find inherent motion. Okay, it's a process. So we cannot pinpoint this is motion. So motion is happening. Motion is not substance. Okay, this is what Nagarjuna is getting at. So in the cause and effect, if we study the cause and effect, is the effect already in the cause? Is it completely absent from the cause? If already present, production is unnecessary. If the plant was already present in the seed, the production was not necessary. If wholly absent, production is unintelligible. If there was no possibility of a plant in a seed, the production will not take place. So you see, dependent arising avoids both extremes. Okay, so this is the case of cause and effect. Let's look at the last case. So this is about the person. Is the person identical with the aggregates? We have studied aggregates in the previous lessons. So is the person identical with the aggregates, different from the aggregates, the possessor of the aggregates, located inside them, found apart from body, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness? I think this is very brilliant. So if we have studied this in lesson number 2, no permanent cell does not mean no person. So we are not denying that there is no personality. We are saying that personality is always, as Baba Ambedkar put it in the Buddha and Dhamma, being is becoming. All the time we are transforming. All the time there is nothing being. Everything is becoming. Okay. So you see, this is true about us also, that we are in a constant flux. We are in a constant motion. We are in the constant change. We are, perpetual flux. So this is the 4th case. So if we have seen this example of a chariot, the chariot returns in this lesson as well. So when we inquired deep into this chariot, the chariot was not found as essence, yet it carried the teaching. Nagarjuna generalizes this insight to every object, concept, and identity. Function without essence, responsibility without soul substance. Okay, so you don't say that because there is anatma, we can do anything. Because, whatever we do creates the condition for something to arise. It becomes the cause of the future effect. Okay, so we are not denying the cause and effect. And that's how, the Buddhists can explain karma without soul. Okay. So function without essence, responsibility without soul substance. So let's go further. So this is a very classical example of the rainbow. So it's a vivid appearance without independent essence. So we all have seen the rainbow, and when we try to find the rainbow, we cannot find it. Right? So the rainbow is there, but it arises depending on the causes and condition. There has to be raindrops in the atmosphere. There has to be sun in the particular angle, and we see that the different light diffusion of light leads to the formation of rainbow. So ultimately the entire reality is like that. It appears to us, but when we inquire deep into that, we don't find anything substantial. We don't find the essence. We don't find the svabhāva. There is no svabhāva to rainbow. Right? So this is the image I think has to struck in your mind whenever we are talking about emptiness. So let's look at the rainbow logic. Neither independent, neither absolutely existence, nor completely non-existence. It is visible. It appears through conditions. It cannot be extracted from those conditions. It changes with the observer's position. It is real as appearance, not as independent substance. Beautiful. This example of the rainbow explains śūnyatā like no other example can. Right? It is visible. We can see it. It appears through causes and conditions. It cannot be extracted from those conditions. We cannot extract rainbow from sunlight or water. It changes with the observer's position. If we change our position, it changes. It is real as appearance, not as independent substance. So it's present, functional, relational, and empty. This is the nature of all the things in the world. All the things in the world. So Nāgārjuna taught about two truths. They are not two different realities or two different worlds. There are two ways of engaging the same world. Okay, so conventional real truth and the absolute truth. They are not in contradiction with each other. They are not two, contradictory truths. They are two ways of engaging the same world. So the world in which the things function, so for example, persons, cups and trees, actions and consequences, language and responsibility, institutions and suffering, ethical practice and social transformation. So whatever exists in conventionally, like, as we have seen the example of, if you look at the previous slide. Okay. So you see, like the example of a rainbow, we have seen the example of a rainbow, neither absolutely existence nor completely non-existence. It is visible. It appears through conditions. It cannot be extracted from those conditions. It changes with the observer's position. It is real as appearance, not as independent substance. And it's present, functional, relational, and empty. And we arrive at this, that there are two truths. They are not in contradiction. They are not two different worlds, but two ways of engaging the same world. And the world in which things function, we have seen persons, nature of persons, cups and trees, like objects in the world, actions and consequences we have seen. We have seen language and responsibility, institutions and suffering that we are going to look into, ethical practice and social transformation. So conventional reality is not fake. We Buddhists do not deny the conventional reality. We affirm that conventionally things exist because they have a function. We don't say that the cup don't exist. We say that the cup exists as a function, but if we examine it deeply, we don't find it having inherently any intrinsic existence. It arises depending on the causes and conditions, right? It doesn't have an independent existence. But as a conventional reality, it exists. Okay, because we drink the water, tea through the cup. We use the cup for various purposes, but inherently it has no reality. So what analysis reveals, so far as, the analysis that we have conducted so far in our lesson, no person, object or institution possesses independent intrinsic existence. So nothing in the world has a svabhāva. Okay, that's why svabhāva śūnyatā is very important for us to understand. So, if we examine ourselves, we cannot find any intrinsic essence. And neither we can find it in any object or in any institution. So nothing possesses independent intrinsic existence. Ultimate analysis does not erase the world. This is very important. So śūnyatā is not denial of the world. We are not erasing the conventional world that we all live into. It removes the fantasy of self-grounded essence. It removes that deep ignorance within us that the things have something intrinsic to it. The object is not destroyed, reification is destroyed. Okay, so let's look at this. Ultimate truth makes convention intelligible. Ultimate truth does not stand above convention. It clarifies how convention works. So dependent origination explains how things work. So convention, dependence, emptiness, function. Because things are empty, they can function independently. That's why the world functions, because they do not have the intrinsic essence. That's why everything functions in the world. If they had anything fixed inside them, intrinsic, nothing, they will not function. Because they cannot interact with any other thing. And because they cannot interact with any other things, they cannot exist. Okay, so because things are empty, they can function independently. And this is the great insight of the Buddha. Because of the emptiness, everything is possible. Okay. So Nāgārjuna rejects both eternalism and nihilism. It is not nihilism. Śūnyatā doesn't mean nihilism. Śūnyatā only means that there is svabhāva śūnyatā. It doesn't deny the processes in the world. It doesn't deny that the thing things arises depending on causes and condition. What Nāgārjuna rejects is nihilism. Buddhism rejects nihilism. Nihilism means nothing exists. Okay, so Buddhism is about transformation. Not and Buddhism is also rejects eternalism, that things exist forever. So this is the beauty of it. Emptiness does not mean non-existence. It means empty of independent essence. And this is very important. If we pursue śūnyatā wrongly, we completely pursue Buddhism wrongly. Okay, so empty does not mean non-existence. It means empty of independent essence. And this is the clarification that saves the teaching. So, three positions: eternalism, permanent independent essence, that is eternalism; nihilism, nothing exists or matters; middle way, dependent function without essence. Nāgārjuna's middle way refuses to freeze the world and refuses to erase it. Okay, it doesn't fixes the world forever. It does not erase the world. It's a functional teaching. That's so very important. And when these teachings come into the hands of Dharmakirti, the way he explains that, experimental thinking. Dharmakirti actually talks about experiments. So, you see, there are these three positions, and Buddhism is middle way, dependent function without essence. So, this is a very important warning, which Nāgārjuna himself gave, and also Buddha gave. So, the snake warning: emptiness wrongly understood is like a snake grasped incorrectly. It can lead us to think in terms of the nihilism. So we have to correctly understand emptiness. So emptiness wrongly understood is like a snake grasped incorrectly. The danger is not emptiness. The danger is turning emptiness into nihilism or another absolute. Many Brahmanical scholars try to equate śūnyatā with a substance, but emptiness is not a substance. It is anti-substance. It is a processual thinking. And a lot of this modern philosophy agrees with the process philosophy. Okay, but if we grasp emptiness as some kind of a substance, metaphysical substance, or nihilism or another absolute, we do not understand what is emptiness. It's like holding, grasping the snake incorrectly. Because things are empty, everything is possible. If things had fixed essence, nothing could arise, change, heal, learn, or become free. So emptiness in essence is the philosophical ground of transformation. So if we look at emptiness philosophically and correctly, we can find that emptiness is the philosophical ground of transformation. The emptiness of emptiness. Do not turn śūnyatā into hidden cosmic substance. Śūnyatā is not hidden cosmic substance. It's a relational reality. It explains as relational reality. That's what the modern, quantum mechanics, talk about. Quantum physics will talk about. So, even we look at śūnyatā, we don't have to turn śūnyatā into a hidden cosmic substance. It is not a hidden cosmic substance. So it's a medicine, not an object of attachment. It is a medicine against fixation. Emptiness is not an absolute. Emptiness is not a universal material. Emptiness is not a mystical background. Emptiness is not a supreme being. Emptiness is not a replacement of Brahma. Emptiness is not a final thing to possess. I think this is what we have to understand when we understand emptiness deeply. So, freedom from essentialism, the critique of essence becomes a critique of fixed social identities. So now I'm going to apply Nagarjuna's teachings to the social, realities. So you see, when we are free from essentialism, the critique of essence becomes a critique of fixed social identities. So these identities, they are just linguistic identities. If we look into the identities, we do not find anything substantial, anything essential, anything intrinsic to the so-called identities. So essentialism in social life, essentialism says a person has a fixed nature. That's what essentialism says. A community has an eternal character. Essentialism says capacity is inherited. Essentialism says status expresses natural reality. Essentialism says social hierarchy is destiny. Nagarjuna breaks the philosophical grammar that makes fixed essence look natural. That's what we see in the social realities around us, that the people teach that they are essential. They are the essence. They are the svabhāva. But the Buddha says, Nagarjuna says that svabhāva śūnyatā. We cannot find any intrinsic svabhāva, any intrinsic essence in anything, any conditioned independent entity in anything. So let's look at its implication for our movement, Ambedkarite implication. What has been constructed through conditions can be dismantled by transforming those conditions. So very clear. I put this graphic here. Even people have tried to create the pyramid of caste. That can be dismantled because that is created condition. There is nothing essential about it. There is no essence. So Nagarjuna gives the critique of essence. Babasaheb Ambedkar gives the program of social reconstruction. Because Babasaheb Ambedkar realized deeply that the things are inherently flexible. This is how Babasaheb Ambedkar, understood śūnyatā. He says at one point that I like Buddhism because it is inherently flexible. This inherent flexibility is nothing but śūnyatā. Okay. So freedom becomes intelligible because reality is not sealed by intrinsic nature. Okay, so nothing exists perpetually as it is. Everything is in the flux. Everything transforms. Everything in the world transforms. Everything in the world transforms. There is no essence. So, okay, let's look at it, So how we are going to approach it in our day-to-day life? We started with an example of a cup. So look for the object. For example, if we are looking at the cup, is the cup its material? Because the cup can be made up of any other material. It can be made up of wood. It can be made up of clay. It can be made up of gold, platinum, you name it. Okay. So is the cup its material? Is its shape? Its shape. So you see, we know that the cup comes in many other forms. Some have handles, some don't have handles. Some are long, some are short. Is it its function? Because the cup can be used for many other things. Is it its name? We know that a cup is called in China it's called beisa. Okay, in other languages, it's called differently. So is it the name? Is it the collection of parts? Is it something separate from the parts? At what point does it become a cup? We have seen, the process of making a cup from clay to, potter, crafting it, and in the furnace, it's baked. And so, at what point of time the cup comes into existence? Does analysis show non-existence or dependent existence? These are the questions. I think these 8 questions, if we bear in mind, we can understand śūnyatā. Use the cup without imagining an independent essence. So this is true about our life also. If we can be in the world without imagining an independent essence, the things in the flux, people in the flux, people change, the reality of the world change, we change all the time. So this is where we arrive at the final slide, and I wanted to show you some beautiful video. But before I show you that, this is a memory map. So we know that dependent origination paticca samutpada, which means nothing arises independently. Because nothing arises independently, we know that, there is no svabhāva, the svabhāva śūnyatā. Because there is absence of svabhāva, nothing exists through its own intrinsic power, which means emptiness. Because the things are empty of independent essence. That doesn't mean we erase the world exists on that level of reality. Conventional existence, things appear, function, and have consequences. Middle way is about neither absolute existence nor absolute non-existence. Freedom, because reality is not fixed, transformation is possible. Because nothing is fixed by an independent essence, freedom is possible. So you see, just to, some people have joined late. So let me just quickly run through this. We have studied this lesson number 5, Emptiness and Nāgārjuna, the middle way beyond essence. We have seen that if everything arises through conditions, what is a thing in itself? And in the lesson 4, we saw independent origination. And in this lesson, we are looking at whether anything exists independently. Then we found that things are real, but they are not independently real. And then we look into the world of solid. We normally meet the world as if it were made of self-contained things because of our perceptual or because of our sensory conditioning. We see the world the way our senses perceive it. And then we inquire into the cup. What is the cup, or any other object for that matter? Then we saw that the cup is a relational. It is a relational identity. It doesn't have any inherent intrinsic existence. And then we saw, that how things come into being. This is how we started learning about śūnyatā. Then from arising to being. Then we saw, can the produced thing exist independently? Then we saw derivation, mathematical derivation, which you can look into. I would recommend you to go through this lecture again and again, because, once we understand this, we understand, what is sammaditthi all about. And then we saw how Nāgārjuna examines the world. And he knows that no independent arising means no independent being. Then what is svabhāva? Because Buddha and Nāgārjuna both talk about svabhāva. Svabhāva means intrinsic nature, self-established nature, or condition independent essence. Then when we examine the essence, something with svabhāva would have to be independent of causes, independent of parts, of relations, of conceptual designations, of general transformation. When we examine that, we don't find any essential things, anything standing of its own. And then we have seen conventional identity, which is very important for us. We are not denying the world of conventional reality. We are only saying that, inherently there is no inherent substance. Then Nāgārjuna examination, the way Nāgārjuna conduct examination, we saw 4 cases of a flame and of motion, of cause and effect, of the person. And then we again looked at the example of chariot that we have been studying, and rainbow. It explains śūnyatā very well. Vivid appearance without independent essence, and neither absolutely existence nor completely non-existence. It's visible, it appears through conditions, it cannot be extracted from those conditions, it changes with the observer's position, it is real as independent, not as independent substance. So, we saw true truths. Then we looked at the world in which things function. So this is what our analysis revealed. No person, object, or institution possesses independent intrinsic existence. Ultimate analysis does not erase the world. It removes the fantasy of self-grounded essence. The object is not destroyed. Reification is destroyed. And we have seen not nihilism. We have seen emptiness does not mean non-existence. It means empty of inherent essence. Then we have seen what is the middle way, because śūnyatā is also called the middle way, dependent function without essence. Then we have the snake warning. Emptiness wrongly understood is like a snake grasped incorrectly. And because things are empty, everything is possible. And emptiness of emptiness we have seen. Then we have seen medicine. It's a medicine, not an object of attachment. It has a lot of healing power. Of course, it is the only way to heal ourselves. Non-grasping, because there is no any essence to grasp. Freedom from essentialism. And we have seen how essentialism can lead to the social hierarchy, and how in śūnyatā, how we can find a tool to dismantle the conditions that has created something. Look for the object. This is the ultimate contemplative exercise that we have to conduct all the time. And this is the final slide. So what I thought before I end, if we can spare another few minutes, I would like to show you something which is very interesting thing. It's about how the universe came into being. There is a lot of now research and a lot of understanding of how universe came into this 10 minutes documentary. Very fascinating, and I think it's very relevant to us. So let me see whether we can see that. Just have a little bit patience because this is very interesting. It's a long time scale, 13.6 billion years of our universe, and it's squeezed into 10 minutes with a beautiful music and beautiful graphics. But it shows that that there is no inherent thing. So let's look at that. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, Doctor.
Okay, okay, okay.
Yes, brother.
थोड़ा एनलार्ज कीजिए अपन इसको ना एनलार्ज कीजिए सर फुल स्क्रीन मोड में कर दीजिए
100 million years
Yeah.
after the Big Bang,
Yeah.
the age of stars begins. The hand of gravity spins billions of stars together into proto-galaxies, connected by a cosmic web of gas and dust. Slowly, dark matter guides infant galaxies into clusters that span millions of light years. Gravity pulls these colossal systems together, locking them into a dance that lasts hundreds of millions of years. As the universe evolves, it enters a brilliant new epoch. When the rate of star formation reaches its peak, forging new suns over 10 times faster than today. Most stars that will ever exist form during this time, seeding the cosmos with light that will endure for trillions of years. Gravity is the architect of all the great wonders of the universe. But the same force that ignites the stars also seals their fate. Black holes formed by the collapse of massive stars are growing in number. Some grow to enormous sizes, sucking up billions of stars worth of matter. These supermassive black holes become the dark engines at the hearts of galaxies, shaping the fate of billions of suns.
ये सिर्फ ऑडियो है सर? मंगेश सर, वीडियो तो चल ही नहीं रहा, वीडियो चल नहीं रहा, सिर्फ
चल रहा है
ऑडियो
ना?
आ रहा है। नहीं चल रहा ना, सिर्फ
Yes,
ऑडियो
sir.
सुनाई दे रहा है और स्टार्ट ही नहीं हुआ अभी तो।
Jets of particles erupt from their cores at nearly the speed of light.
क्या वीडियो नहीं दिख रहा था क्या?
Stars that venture too close
और
to
ऑडियो आ रहा है सिर्फ।
No, sir. The
destroyed
screen
by the
was
same
freezed.
force
That the
that
video's
gave life.
screen is freezed.
क्या हो गया इसको?
या तो आप उसका लिंक हमें भेज दीजिए, हम अपने आप देखें।
ठीक है, मैं वही वीडियो भेज दूंगा
Way.
हाँ हाँ
क्योंकि वीडियो बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है, मेरे को लगा
हाँ,
दिख
नहीं
रहा
नहीं,
होगा।
हम क्या है वो ऑडियो आ रहा है सिर्फ और वीडियो शुरू ही नहीं हुआ।
हो गया फिर यहाँ तो एक मिनट
नहीं, किसी को भी नहीं दिखाई दिया।
हो गया। अरे यार बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग वीडियो था वो। एनीवे वो मतलब मैं इसलिए वीडियो दिखाने वाला था, दिखा रहा था वो कि वो मतलब जैसे मतलब ओरिजिन ऑफ यूनिवर्स है, तो वो मतलब वो ये ऐसा नहीं कि मतलब वो बुद्धिज्म को प्रूव करता है या कुछ नहीं। साइंस इज अ वेरी डिफरेंट डोमेन ऑल टुगेदर। बट ये सब जो चीजें है, मतलब आप ह्यूमन एग्जिस्टेंस को देखिए या यू लुक एट एनीथिंग इन द वर्ल्ड, we can see that there is no inherent, intrinsic essence, and things evolve. Things change all the time from one thing to another. That is the basic law of the nature. There is nothing fixed, and that is what is dependent origination is all about. So in essence, what I would like to say is, if we launch our inquiry into nature of anything in the world, that's what the Buddha taught. That's what Nagarjuna explained so brilliantly. And when we go ahead, we can look into other Buddhist philosophers when they talk about how things appear to us. And I think that's the beauty of Buddhism, that it doesn't deny the world of our sensory world. And in fact, it is called the Kama Vachara Chitta, the world that comes into being, because of our senses. And we know that our senses are limited. And, there are other sort of realities that we cannot perceive. We need special instruments for that. So but the science is enabling us to see beyond what we are capable of seeing through our senses or experiencing through our senses, through the language of mathematics, through the language of for example, radio telescope. We can almost, the documentary that I was showing you, even we cannot travel that far a distance. So for example, our galaxy itself is so huge, and there are so many billions of stars in our own galaxy. We are sitting at the corner of that spiral of Milky Way, and there are so many galaxies, billions of galaxies. So it's very difficult even to go beyond the solar system. The only object which is going to go beyond the solar system is Voyager, and it's scheduled to go beyond that in 2030. So you see, distances are vast. So many, the world, if you look at the sky, we perceive with the eye, sky with our particular eyes. But if we, really look into the radio waves, or, it's a complete different reality altogether, which we don't conceive or perceive through our senses. So we live in a world that is created by our senses, by our mind, by the structure of our consciousness, and we take that as it is. But the Buddha asks us to inquire deeply, and we can understand our consciousness. We can understand the perceptual processes, and that's the genius of the Buddha. He understood the mental states. He explained us how the world comes into being. But whatever exists in the world, there is no intrinsic sense. There is no mind as such. You see, even the mind is not a primal substance. So even the mind arises depending on the causes and conditions. And that is the beauty of emptiness or śūnyatā, that it can enable us to look at the world as to how one condition leads to other condition, how things arise. And when we say thing, from the Buddhist point of view, there is no thing. It's only processual happening, taking place. One thing leading to another, another thing leading to another. Even the world thing is a conventional notion. But if we examine a thing, we cannot find, anything essential. If we examine the chariot, as Nagarjuna told to Milind, we cannot find, intrinsic chariot. Chariot is a convention given to that function. Okay, so let's open up for comments and discussion for a few minutes, because I think this is a very heavy class, one of the heaviest classes that we dealt today. And I request you all to go through the lesson as and when you can, because it needs a lot of attention to understand a lot of things. But this is a very interesting domain. So let's open up for a couple of minutes for discussion. I'm sorry the video didn't work.
नहीं, मेरी प्रॉब्लम ये है,
बोलो।
थ्योरेटिकली तो हम समझ गए, लेकिन क्या है, जब यहाँ से जाएंगे ना क्लास से बाहर, और फिर अपन उसी पैटर्न पे आ जाएंगे। ये इसको याद कैसे रखा जाए? हाउ टू मेक इट ए पार्ट ऑफ आवर थिंकिंग एंड
Yes, but
you got my point.
Yes, I got your point. But this is how is the beginning of realization. इसको in Buddhism we call it what is called the Śrutamaya Prajna. Okay, you study the Dhamma, you study what the Buddha taught. So that doesn't mean that you realize it. Okay,
but उसको अपनी थिंकिंग में अप्लाई भी तो करना है ना?
Yes, but you can apply it only when you understand it, no? Okay, so how do you understand something? By dwelling deep into that, by reading it, by thinking about it.
Yes.
Right? Then you put into practice, then you see how it appears, what happens. Okay,
पर आपने बड़ा अच्छा हमें एक्सप्लेन किया, बड़ा नाइसली किया एक्सप्लेन, थोड़ा ना बहुत क्लैरिटी आई है, एटलीस्ट थ्योरेटिकली वी आर क्लियर.
Thank you.
It's really a nice experience, and that what we were just talking about, that execution. At least we have to, somewhere we are getting that in routine life. If we try to implement it or try to execute that one, so surely that will be beneficial to improve the life and thought process and mental stability. I think that's what my intake for today is.
Good. So that's a process. So don't underestimate the study. Don't underestimate yourself. Okay. So, the practice part is connected with the study part.
Yes.
Okay. So we study, we go deep into understand the concept. We see how we can apply them in our lives. Then we see how they work. Right. And then they become part of us. So it's a process. So don't underestimate the process of studying the Dhamma. It's very important to study the Dhamma.
आपने ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन का नाम तो लिया था, लेकिन उसको आगे ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन का बद छोड़ दिया फिर आपने, तो वो आपको कवर करना है.
यस
नहीं,
उसका एक ही इसेंशियल पॉइंट है कि एवरीथिंग कैन बी ट्रांसफॉर्म.
तो हाउ वो आप पे
we create the conditions.
Yes.
No problem. Okay, we will do that. Anyone else?
Thank you, sir. Today's lecture was not only heavy, it was very deep too. And I request you to kindly give more time on each key points it requires. And from today's lecture, can we say that we perceive through illusions the things through its emptiness? And can we conclude it like this, that whole is greater than sum of its part?
No, that we can say, but we cannot say that the word is illusion. Okay, the word doesn't appear to us as it is, but the word appears to us based on our senses, right? So for example, we perceive a very narrow bandwidth of the electromagnetic spectrum. The dog will have a very different sense of the colors. The birds will have a very different sense of the colors. The way we hear in a particular, frequency. And there are animals who can hear far, lower frequencies. And, our sense of smell is also limited. So the world around us is created by our senses. Not created by our senses means, whatever we see, we cannot see it beyond our senses. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that doesn't mean that we cannot perceive the reality of mind. That's what the Buddhist method is all about, to know your mind, to know how you perceive the things, to know how the world, what appears to us, what is the reality of the world. So very, very beautiful. Yes.
Yeah, both way we are under the conditions. The things have been created conditionally, and we are perceiving it on conditions also.
Very beautifully put. So depending on
Right.
our senses, we perceive the world. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that the world doesn't exist.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir, doctor.
Jai
Yes.
Bhim, brother.
Jai Bhim, Satish.
Yeah, so I understand the things. Can you be a little bit articulate on the distinguishing line between the conventional truth and the ultimate truth?
Okay.
Because the ultimate truth also empty, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Empty
So
means
there
there
is
is
a
no.
line, right?
Yes. Okay. Please go on.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there is a yeah. Please.
See, the conventional reality means the reality that in which we live. So, for example, the example of the cup. Okay, so we know that the cup is there conventionally, functionally, it works for us. We can drink tea out of it, we can drink soup out of it, it has a function.
So
So,
it's a kind of positive, right?
what?
Conventional is positive. Conventional is kind of positive,
It can be
right?
positive and negative also, because, it's like labels. So, like labels like, say, lower caste, upper caste, they are also labels
Yeah.
conventionally, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so conventionally doesn't mean positive, negative. It means that, functionality. That, I see the color blue, but the blue color might not be there, right?
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Okay,
Understand. So
but
it's a
I
kind of
perceive blue.
negation.
So I cannot say
Yeah,
that, there is no blue. I can tell you, Satish, this is blue, right?
yeah, I understand that actually. So ultimate truth is kind of negation. So you can negate, and find it what is the thing exists or not, something like right.
No. Actually, that is what I have been thinking all the time about Shunyata, but it's not like that.
Okay.
Buddha is not saying that the things doesn't exist.
Yeah, I got
Okay, the Buddha is saying that everything arises depending on causes and conditions.
it. Yeah.
Okay, they come into existence, they sustain so long as the conditions are there, like flame. The flame is sustained so long as fuel is there, right?
Yeah, it's a dependent.
Right. So, it is dependent origin. The flame has a dependent origination. It depends on the combustion, air. If there is no air, there will be no flame.
Yeah.
Right. So we are not denying that there is no flame. We are saying that the flame doesn't have an independent existence.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. But the flame is a conventional. So I will tell you, Satish, don't touch the flame, you will get burned.
So it's conventionally helpful and it's positive kind of.
Yes, conventionally helpful and positive. That's why we use it.
So
And
when you deep into that, we
Hmm.
can find out it's out that doesn't have any intrinsic realities and ultimate truth also the empty of emptiness.
Yeah.
Right? It depends on conventional.
Yes. But
So we
emptiness,
cannot take it as a absolute.
no, nothing is absolute in the world.
Yeah, got it.
Only science says that the speed of light is absolute. Right?
We
But
cannot know that.
yeah, but we don't know for sure, because now there are
Yeah,
other claims. Okay, anyway.
we know from thank you, sir. Thank you, brother.
So anyone? Pallavi raised her hands. Pallavi?
Yes, Dada. I wanted to ask you, or can we conclude the whole lecture into saying that Buddha said that um, he talked about the eternal things, what is perpetual, Can we say that change is perpetual in this case? Understanding Shunyata. Change is perpetual or Sanatan. When the Brahminical people, they often talk about Sanatana, and
Yes.
that something that is eternal. So,
Yes.
giving somebody Buddhist perspective, or in debates or in discussions, can we project this eternal thing as the change?
Yes, because there are certain laws which are there, like the law of gravity. If you throw something up, it will come down. So, the change is the law. We cannot say that, it's, permanent or whatever. It's a law, because of change, everything is possible. So you can say that, yeah.
And one more thing, sorry to interrupt, but one more thing that, see, everybody doesn't have that Sammaditi and Shrutimay Pragya, because every creature, every human being will have different perspectives to understand the world and people, may it be objects or people, anything, the society. So people will have different perspectives. And there is, the number of creatures or number of people that are in this universe will have those many perspectives to view the world,
Okay.
or to view the functions of how the world runs. So how can we, do justice with somebody's
No, the reality
uh,
it is not dependent on you. Reality is not dependent on any of us. It is the way it is, right? So if we perceive a rope as a snake, that's my problem. If I perceive it like that, if I perceive what is impermanent as permanent, which is not lacking a essence as having a essence, if I perceive like that, I suffer, right? So it's not accommodating people into some kind of ideology. Buddhism is about calling spade a spade. Okay, so it's the way it is. It's not dependent on me. The reality is not dependent on any of us. The law of gravity is not dependent on any of us. It is the way it is. Okay, likewise, the fact of change is the way it is. Anatma, Shunyata is the way it is. This is how is everything. If people don't understand it, it's their problem. Ultimately, we all suffer because we don't see the way it is, right? So we are not trying to accommodate views of people to produce something into a kind of a community of people sharing the same view. We are trying to free the people. We are trying to free the people from the delusions, from their imperfect topsy-turvy way of looking at the world, which is called in Buddhism vipallas. The way we all have this topsy-turvy view of the world. We live as if we will be there forever. We live as if there is some essential me inside, and we live as if the things are not going to change. The world is not going to change. Everybody will die. I will not die, isn't it? But the reality is independent of us,
Yes.
right?
Thank you so much.
I just have one
Yes,
more. I have one question,
yes.
Parag. So we are talking about conventional and ultimate truth. So what what I perceive here is there is no past or there is no future, but in reality, the inheritance will exist in present itself because it's inherent, its svabhāva will keep changing. So whatever at this moment, I still see that it has that svabhāva, but in the next moment it's changing. But what I see is okay. Looking at the world, it is changing, but svabhāva does exist. If you have kind of attention to that, then only you have power to change that.
Parag, we call it patterns. Like, for example,
Mm,
DNA is not a substance, it's a pattern, right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, like everything, if you look at ourselves at the cellular level, it's not fixed, it's a pattern. So, the patterns arise. So, for example, we have seen in the previous class the example of a whirlpool, right? So, we
yeah,
cannot say that, or for example, rainbow. We cannot say
yeah,
that the rainbow doesn't exist, okay? It appears to us, but if we examine it, it's not there, right?
yeah.
So likewise, we cannot say, because even the present is created by the conditions of the past.
Correct. But it's very different than the past, right?
It's
Present
very,
is just it's very different than past, and it is different than future as well.
yeah.
So present is one which is not going to replicate, but present has that svabhāva which is very inherent to it. That's what I feel
So
means.
it's a pattern. That's why I use the word pattern instead of, swabhāva. Swabhāva is not there because intrinsically, for example, caste. It's a pattern. It comes
Yeah,
into existence because
correct,
of the causes and conditions, like endogamy, some people having hold over a lot of things, right? If those conditions are
yeah,
gone, caste is gone.
correct. No, in case of objects like you took
Hmm.
an example of cup, right? That cup itself,
Hmm.
for that moment, it is okay. A cup has certain characteristics. It's formed based on something, but now the next moment it might, the way it is used or way it is being observed, it might change its characteristics. So the internal, means inherent svabhāva or it will the existence of it might change, but at that moment for it how it perceived is different. Maybe I think yeah, I understand there's a pattern. It's everything is interconnected. It's keep changing, or we should look at uh, in that way. But if you think that everything is changing, do I need to do anything for
No, that's
to
why.
change anything?
Yes, that's why there is a cause and condition. No, that's why there is a ethics in Buddhism. Like, there are laws, and if we act or behave in certain way, it will set up the conditions for future, right?
Yeah.
So if we behave or speak in certain way now, we create conditions that will lead to future conditions. So because there is paticca samutpad, there is a law of karma, right? But there is no what is called there is a very beautiful sutta,
Yes.
Bahya Sutta. There is seeing but no seer.
Yeah.
Okay. So we will look into this. These are, we have 5 more remaining classes. So let's not finish everything
Okay.
in one class. We have got a long
No
way to
problem.
go. 5 more classes. Okay.
Sir, it's a request. The next lecture should be the part 2 of this lecture.
Umesh bhai, I have already planned 10 lectures. So let's finish them and then we can. Okay. All right then.
Because
Yes.
it requires much more time.
Good.
And please do suggest some books to go deep, sir.
Good, Umesh bhai. Good. Okay, then should we end our class today? Okay, thank you all for joining in. See you next week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Thank
sir.
you, my sir.